Hello and welcome back to the Smart Start Recreational Therapy Insights YouTube channel. This is Nathan Lemaster from Smart CU's Hub, your host for this series. Today we are on week number 7 and we're going to be talking about a topic that is pretty well talked about at a lot of conferences for rec therapists, but it is something that needs to be honed in. So that is documentation best practices. So as the saying goes, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And without further ado, let's dive right in. So why does documentation matter? Well, documentation just isn't a formality. It is the backbone of an effective, transparent care plan for our clients. Let's look at 3 reasons why this is true. Number 1, communication and continuity of care. Thorough records help you share progress with the entire disciplinary team. So that's your PTs, your OTs, your speech, your other therapists that you're working with if you're working in a clinical setting. And it allows them to know what's going on and what you notice and what the progress has been through the interventions that you've been providing. Clear documentation ensures that everyone stays on the same page regarding client goals, interventions used, and the observed outcomes. So that's a really important point, guys. So number 2, why does it matter? Legal and ethical obligations. Yes, proper documentation can protect you in case, something happens, right? So let's say a patient does something and you didn't document maybe some precursors to that incident. And later, you're brought into court to go talk about what you noticed about this patient and why this wasn't actually talked about or documented, because it could have been something that would have prevented something else happening. Let's say in a psych setting, they got out and they hurt somebody. Okay, so if you don't document correctly or document at all, you are putting yourself at risk. Okay, so it demonstrates professionalism and accountability as well, showing that you followed the standards and ethical guidelines. Okay, so this is also to make you look like you know what you're talking about. So if you don't have documentation, doesn't matter how good of a therapist you are, nobody will know. Anyways, except for the person that you're obviously seeing, but then what if they didn't like you? So that's just, that's sidetracking. So let's keep going. Reimbursement and funding. Okay, so insurance companies and administrators often require specific documentation to justify reimbursement. So if you didn't document, right, you can't claim on insurance that you did anything, then insurance isn't going to give you any money. So, or give your business that you work for any money. Okay, detailed progress notes showing measurable changes can help secure ongoing support for your RT program. So, like we talked about in previous episodes, we talked about the need for legislature to take us seriously. Well, if you don't have documentation showing, okay, I did these things and it achieved these things with these clients, then, maybe you have some client success stories the client can say themselves, which is great, but also having documentation really does help the process of getting licensure, getting reimbursed, all of that. So make sure that you keep these notes, because it will help you later in the line, and it will help our profession as a whole. Okay. So by keeping accurate records, you're not only helping your clients, but you're advocating for recreational therapy in the broader healthcare landscape. All right, so what are some essential elements of quality documentation? Let's talk about the basic components that make your documentation both meaningful and compliant. So number 1, it's got to have the date, the time, and the session length. Always include when a session occurred and how long it lasted. This helps track consistency and frequency of your service. So if you're going to be turning this in for reimbursement, they need to know how long you worked with them and what day and all of that. So that's one part of your documentation that should always be there. Second, your goals and objectives. So reference the specific client goals that you came up with when you did the assessment and then what are you addressing during that session. So this is how you'll be able to say, like, okay, so and so attended my session on this, and throughout the session they did this, and by the end of the session they were able to do this, or they showed this. That is how you can write that goals or objectives were being met. Okay, and then you're going to include what interventions that you used. So briefly describe the intervention or the activity that you used. For example, group drumming for stress management. Okay, so if you're going to do that, then that could be one thing that you're doing. For me, I can tell you about back when I worked in behavioral health, I did this session to work on effective communication styles with clients who had some anger issues, and sometimes that caused a lot of other issues socially with their family, their friends, etc. at home. And so we did the game of whose line is it anyway, where we had a group and we had two of us, so myself and usually a client who raised their hand. So one of the patients in the room would raise their hand and say they would like to come up and do some improv with me. And so the audience then would choose the scene. So they would say, like, for instance, you're in a grocery store and this guy comes behind you in line and is, trying to get his groceries. And so, I might act out, one style of communication. So, the three types: assertive, aggressive, and passive. But I'm not going to say that I'm saying that. I'm just going to act it out. And so are they. They're going to pick one, and they get to pick one at random. And then after the scene is done, then the group determines whether they were aggressive, passive, or assertive. And then we dissect that into what that means and what that actually looks like. Then we redo the scene and try a different type of communication. Sometimes, a lot of times actually, people that think that they're being assertive are actually coming across as aggressive. And some other times, people that are really passive, they get walked on and they don't get their needs met. And so they need to work on some assertive language using I statements, for instance. So, thirdly, in a documentation, you need to have client response. So what happened? What did they respond to? So how did the client engage with the activity? Were they enthusiastic? Were they reserved? Did they not want to do anything at all? And include any observations that you noticed. So like John, when he was speaking to Sally, he became very aggressive, and you could see on his face that he was angry. He was slamming his hand and he was not happy with her. And so by the end of the session, when we were working on anger management, we taught John some ways that he can handle that better in the future, to where whatever Sally was doing wouldn't get him so irritated, and he can get his needs met as well without being aggressive. Okay, so we're also going to include in documentation progress towards the goals. So what progress has been made towards the goals. And finally, we're going to include the plan and the next steps. So what are we going to do in follow-up sessions with that client or with the group that we're with? And so how are we going to continue improving on these goals that we set with the client? All right, when each of these elements is present, you have a solid foundation for defensible, informative documentation that guides your ongoing treatment decisions. All right, so now here's some tips for efficiency and accuracy. Because if we're writing all these notes all day, we need to know how to be efficient with it. Okay, so it can be a time-consuming process. Sometimes we spend just as much time documenting as we did doing the session, if we have enough people in that session and we're writing paragraphs. I was working at this hospital that we were still writing things by hand a while back. We didn't even have electronic documentation yet. I know, weird. Okay, so you might want to use a template or a checklist. So your template could be a pre-made form that can prompt you to include essential details, saving time and reducing the risk of missing information. So a lot of times the notes, they start out a certain way, they have different parts, and you can add like fill in the blank things of when during the session the client blah blah blah. The goal for the session was blah blah blah, and the session was this much time, blah blah blah. Anyways, so that could help you to be more efficient having these templates pre-made. And then you can customize templates for specific settings. So if you're going to be doing a specific activity that you've done in the past, you might have one specific for that activity just to make it go a little quicker. All right, you're going to document in real time or soon after so that you don't forget anything, any details. So you might document during the session if you can. Not everybody can do that because they're actually leading the session, but if you have like an assistant in the room, maybe they could be the one documenting things, and then you check it over just to make sure it's accurate, or if you need to add anything at the end, and then sign off on it. And even a few bullet points that help you remember like what actually happened during the session can be really helpful. All right, and thirdly, you're going to stay objective. You're going to focus on observable facts and behaviors. So you're not going to put your opinions in, like what you think is the case. Right here, it is time to just put what you saw and what happened. Okay, so later in your treatment team discussions, you could talk about possible reasons why. That's why you're there as a group, but you don't want to go in and say, well, the reason I did this was because of this, okay? Because that's putting your bias potentially on that situation. Okay, so we're going to leverage technology. If you can use electronic records, please do. And if your electronic records have all these things like pre-written templates, checklists, all that stuff, please use that. That'll make life so much easier for you. And it can go and be aggregated automatically to the medical records for that client. Okay, and then you're going to do have regular peer reviews. So collaborate with a colleague or supervisor to review your documentation, just to give you some pointers. Maybe they see some things that you didn't see. Okay, and then they might give you some constructive feedback that can help you improve your documentation skills for the future. So time is precious, and especially in healthcare settings when you got to see lots of clients. These tips can help to ensure that you have a balance of thoroughness with efficiency and keeping your focus on quality as well as actually seeing the clients. All right, now for a wrap up and takeaway from this session. Let's recap some things. 1, documentation is essential for communication, legal compliance, and reimbursement. Okay, quality notes should include date and time, goals, interventions, client response, and the next steps. And number 3, efficiency strategies. Like templates, real-time note-taking, and peer reviews. These things can save you time and help you to spend more time seeing clients rather than spending all of your day with documenting. Okay, so guys, thank you guys again so much for viewing this session. I'm hoping that you're liking this series and that you're seeing the benefit from watching these little snippets on your Mondays. This is week number 7 of 52. And as we continue, we will continue diving into topics hopefully that are really interesting to you. And we're going to be talking about goal writing and progress notes next week. So another part of your documentation. And so guys, without further ado, thank you guys so much for being here. Remember to like and subscribe so that you see these videos again on your channel. And as always, recreational therapists, have a happy Monday and stay classy.